I'd like to introduce myself as Richard Gruetter. I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, went to Auburn University, War Eagle, graduated with a mechanical engineering degree, and from there went in the United States Air Force and flew Uncle Sam's airplanes. After that, after 8 years, I went with Delta Airlines and flew their planes until 1995. But for the last 20 years, I've had a fascination with our nation's history, with our culture, with our founding values, because they're extremely important, folks, but they're things that we're losing. And so what I want to do today is talk to you about these things that we no longer teach our children. And there's a wonderful video out there you might want to watch. It's called Agenda, Grinding America Down. And what it does, it explains why Christianity is the only religion that ever comes under attack, ever. No other religion. What for that? Listen for that on the news and everything. And it's summed up with a statement that was made in the beginning of the video by Joseph Stalin when he headed up the USSR. He said, America's like any living organism. He said, it protects itself in three ways. First, it's patriotism, it's religion, it's morality. He said, if we can destroy these three things, America will crumble from within. Folks, you know what? They've been very successful. They've taken over our schools, they've taken over our news media, our culture, and so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'd like to welcome you to our presentation on a review of our nation's founding values, our founding documents and how they form our constitutional republic, the uniqueness and characteristics, how we are losing our constitutional republic that rests on our founding values and documents, and what we can do about it. Helen Keller once was asked, what could possibly be worse than being blind? Without a thought, she said, sight with no vision. I believe that calls into question, what's our vision? The vision of the future is actually based in large part on our knowledge of the past, isn't it? And what is really happening around us. We're basically in a battle of worldviews, and a lot of people don't even realize that. Let's look at a comment by James Madison. He said, do not separate text from historical background. If you do, you will have perverted and subverted the Constitution, which can only end in a distorted, bastardized form of illegitimate government. Folks, he's right. In 1911, Woodrow Wilson said, a nation which does not remember what it was yesterday does not know what it is today, nor what it's trying to do. We are trying to do a futile thing if we do not know where we came from or what we have been about. The Bible tells us, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Karl Marx said, take away their heritage and they're easily persuaded. Thomas Jefferson warned, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. He later said, I know of no safe depository of the ultimate powers of society, but the people themselves. If we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is a true corrective of abuses of constitutional power. And folks, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Lenin said, whoever controls the present or whoever writes the history books controls the past. Whoever controls the past controls the future. Our founding values are no longer taught in our public schools. The result is that we are losing the heritage that is foundational to freedom and our constitutional republic. So what's happening around us? We're in a war of worldviews. Christians are losing because we're not even engaged in the battle. This battle is not a spectator sport. We must engage the battle on the field of play with proper knowledge and preparation. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Think of our nation as a large oak tree that protects. It's got strong limbs, a strong structure that protects us in our lives, our liberties, and our pursuit of happiness. These limbs actually extend around the world and help protect freedom around the world. But you have to feed and nurture this tree. If this tree dies, what nation will be left that has the ability and the will to protect liberty around the world? I don't think there'll be any. It's taken us 4,000 years to get to where we are today in this nation. If we lose this nation, I believe it'll be centuries upon centuries upon centuries before freedom can exist in this world again. So what is foundational to our constitutional republic like our roots? First of all, in a word, the Bible. It has been biblical scriptures and history that has formed our foundation of our nation. As an example, there are about 600 scriptures that affect civil law. Isaiah 33:22 influenced our separation of powers horizontally. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king. We don't have a king, but that's the executive branch. That's the three branches of government. Our vertical form of government comes from Exodus 18:20 through 21, which states, "And you shall teach them the statutes and the laws, and show them the way in which they must walk and the work they must do. Moreover, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, hundreds, fifties, or tens." That's a vertical separation of powers, folks. The federal level, state, county, and local. The education referred to in verse 20 is exceptionally important. Learning the statutes and the laws and learning the way in which we must walk and the work we must do is exceptionally important. Our founders understood the critical requirement for education and warned us. As an example, Noah Webster, who was considered the father of American education, said, "It is an object of vast magnitude that systems of education should be adopted and pursued, which may not only diffuse the knowledge of the sciences, but may implant in the minds of the American youth the principles of virtue and of liberty, and inspire them with just and liberal ideas of government and with an inviolable attachment to their own country." Now, they knew that patriotism was extremely important. And you can see that right there. Liberal government back then, by the way, was a move away from kings. A liberal government today is a move away from our founding values. It's the same thing, but it's used in different contexts. We need to understand that. Liberalism was good in the founding of our country because it brought in freedom and liberty. It took us from from man's law to God's law. Now liberty, or the liberalism, or whatever wants to take us from God's law back to man's law. Daniel Webster also warned, and let me mention something about Daniel Webster here. He was one of the top orators ever in our nation. In fact, he spent not only a lot of years in Congress, but he was so good in the courtroom that quite often when the other side saw him come in the courtroom, they would get up and leave because they knew they had little chance of winning the case. He was a wonderful man. But look what he said. He said, "If we abide by the principles taught in the Bible, our country will go on prospering and continue to prosper. But if we and our posterity neglect its instruction and authority, no man can tell how sudden a catastrophe may overwhelm us and bury all our glory in profound obscurity." Folks, we're racing toward that today because we've failed to take heed from the warnings of the founders of our past. The Northwest Ordinance required in Article 3, and before we talk, let's talk about the Northwest Ordinance. Not too many people really understand what that is. The Northwest Ordinance was passed under the Articles of Confederation as the ground rules under which new states were allowed in the Union. It was reauthorized by Congress the same week when they were writing the First Amendment. Now, if a state were to do anything repugnant to the Northwest Ordinance, they would not have been allowed to be part of the Union. So let's see what Article 3 said. Article 3 says, "Religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary for good government and the happiness of mankind, that schools and the means of education forever encourage." Now, this same verbiage was found in the Ohio State Constitution, Mississippi State Constitution, other state constitution, because they knew, not only the federal government, but the state governments knew they needed to teach religion, morality, and knowledge in our schools. That's interesting, and that's an interesting way they put it. Religion first, then morality, and then knowledge. That was extremely important to our founders. They knew, in fact, I believe it was John Adams that said, "No government has power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by religion and morality." He said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It's totally inadequate to the government of any other. And folks, we're proven right. They had so many warnings back in those days, and we don't teach any of this in our schools anymore. None of it. There are literally thousands of quotes from our founders concerning the biblical foundations of our constitutional republic, and they knew that proper education was imperative to our continued freedom. Education waters and fertilizes our foundational roots, but only if it's truth. Otherwise, education poisons our roots. And folks, I believe that's what's happening today. Our education has distorted and revised our history, our true history. And it gets back to what Karl Marx say, take away their heritage and they're easily persuaded. That's what's happening to us, folks.